Welcome to Crypto Internet. Today we're bringing to the stage Trubit, the very first user-owned data marketplace built on Bitcoin. Now, just think of it, right? Right now, free networks like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube are selling your data and getting rich off of it. Well, what if it were possible to take your data from these companies and sell it for Bitcoin? But first, let's give a big welcome to our host, Munib Ali of Stacks, and special guest, Mitchell Cuevas, who is Stacks' very own head of growth. Welcome to the stage, you two.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Mitchell, great to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Some people told me that my voice used to be worse. I got phones. I don't know if they're worse or better than before.
You sound good to me.
All right, awesome. Well, I think people know us. Let's focus on the guest today, Trubit. I'd love to hear more. Let's dive right into it.
Nice, yeah. I can go right ahead if you like. Just as you said, we're building Trubit to be the first user-owned data marketplace built on Bitcoin. And this is really for where brands and consumers can engage with one another more authentically by way of Trubit's NFTs. And our main thesis is that the transition from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0 will see a shift from a paradigm where brands are advertising at consumers to one where brands are building communities with them. And so for us, the NFT is a primitive. This will facilitate these new types of value exchange, and we're already seeing examples of that you could see with Nike and Starbucks recently, and how they're going to kind of have these interoperable NFTs. But really, what does all that mean? And I can unpack that a bit. But mostly for consumers, on the consumer side of our platform, Trubit will enable them, an individual, to create their very own personalized NFT that serves to codify property rights of their Web 2.0 data. And they can put that data into their Trubit NFT, and then onward, this NFT can enable personalized experiences on Web 3.0 platforms. And what's really cool is that this comes with the added ability, as mentioned, that you can monetize this data that's attached to your NFT in exchange for stacking sats. And so users will be able to receive and redeem NFTs offered by brands as well on the Trubit platform. And this furthermore becomes a novel way, again, for people to stack sats, as you can get paid for your attention or for actually engaging or redeeming these NFTs. But brands are paying to reach a target audience daily already. And instead of that payment going to big tech, and all these intermediaries, like ad tech, martech, and these middlemen, it's primarily going to go to the NFT owner as a payment in Bitcoin. And so users will have an easy way to earn passive income from their NFT for something that they already have, which is their data. And so, all this will be codified and, programmatically secured by, Stacks ecosystem or Stacks, blockchain and the Clarity smart contracts. And then on the flip side, for brands, we're offering exciting new ways for them to engage with consumers and building their own branded communities, meaning that they can actually, go and create and publish their very own NFTs that will be made available to consumers on the Trubit platform and marketplace. And these NFTs, again, can represent, digital goods, coupons, experiences, exclusive access to maybe digital or physical spaces, tokenized loyalty programs, anything else that a brand can, think of and dream of in the future. And to kind of close it out, the great thing about this is that brands, again, are cutting out the middleman and getting deeper connections with existing customers and, could be new customers based on the underlying data that, these NFT owners have connected to their Trubit NFT, which is literally built on the very first party data that Google, Facebook, Instagram, and all these walled gardens have concealed, over the past decade. And, I'll kind of stop there and can gladly dig into any of these points, as I'm sure there will be questions.
Awesome. That's super helpful. So I think the first question that I have is, are you thinking of the NFT as almost like a license to the data, and the license is basically represented as the NFT?
Yep, that's a great way of putting it. Basically like the least access to your NFT for, potentially multiple, DApps services, buyers of data, to essentially consume your NFT. And we're actually, kind of stepping into something new here as we're extending the use case of what NFTs are. But yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of summarize it or an analogy.
Got it. And then there's, are you thinking some sort of access control as well? Like one thing is a license, right? Like from a legal perspective, but the second thing is that would the NFT then have some sort of access control over the actual data? Because the data, I'm assuming, is going to be stored off-chain in some sort of decentralized storage. But I would love to learn a little bit more about how you're thinking about the actual data storage.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And yet, Ian or Saj, feel free to chime in after this here. The ideas that we've kind of had here is that Trubit is obviously, our platform, but we are talking with the grants team about, kind of delving into what this would look like. And what we want to do is, super friendly user interface, whether that's like a browser extension or potentially just, some type of widget. But as of right now, it'd be something as simple as like toggling on and off, kind of these data categories and data elements that we've seen that most of these platforms will structure the data as. So you could say like, basic profile information, my general interest, my inferred interest, or, I'm a sneakerhead, whatever. And I can just toggle these types of, data sets on and off so somebody can consume them, and I can do that easily on the fly. If that makes sense.
Yep, that makes sense. We'll love to hear more if anybody else wants to chime in.
Yeah, one of the first things this made me think of when I saw it was we had this early notion of collections, just like types of data sets and schemas applied to, your at the time block stack ID, now your stacks ID. I'm curious how you guys are just like at a high level thinking of breaking down the different data types so that they're consumable by, a broad range of potential brands and so forth.
Ian, Saj? No?
Yeah, I can have it. Sorry, guys. So yeah, I think you're exactly right. And where we want to take this is, if you look across many of the different platforms that Stephen was alluding to earlier in terms of, social media platforms, it doesn't have to stop there. There's of course platforms like Amazon, you have purchase data. So we're sort of taking initial inspiration from these types of platforms that folks use on an almost everyday basis. And from that, you can kind of categorize a sort of data hierarchy that can help inform the type of metadata attributes or data structure that we can start appending to these NFTs. But the other important piece is we want to also build this in a way to where other builders and sort of developers can add to that structure. Think of adding branches to a tree. And so initially we're going to seed it with some of the very common, let's say demographics as a example category. You could have kind of purchasing data as a category. You could have interests as a category. And so we would have this sort of initialized structure that could be added to over time as folks see the need, depending on what sort of categories become more prominent in the future or less prominent.
I can imagine some categories emerging as more valuable to brands, and like they might be willing to pay more for one type or another. And I was also curious, as a kind of follow on to that, do you guys imagine a sort of versions for users where, say, I'm comfortable sharing everything that's not personally identifiable, but then maybe if brands want to pay extra, I'm willing to sell my personally more personal, like as layers kind of come in closer to the person? Or do you imagine it's just all kind of one stop?
Yeah, it's a really good point in terms of some data being more valuable than others. You're exactly right. Whenever a brand's going into a platform today, whether that's Facebook or whether they're partnering with their demand side platform, their DSP or their ad agency, whatever the case is, they're defining that target audience, their ideal universe of folks that share traits XYZ. And as you would rightly guess, things that get the closest proximity to, propensity to purchase is, of course, the holy grail. And so if you could get all the way to like spend data, and that can be aggregated, it could be, hey, Ian spent $100 over the last, X months on this type of sort of merchant category, that becomes very, very valuable. What's also valuable but less valuable is something like, well, Ian's interested in sports or camping or what have you. So there's definitely a gradation there, and the pricing therein is exactly right. It's going to be dictated by how extensive the brand wants that sort of query to be when defining that target audience. In terms of PII or personally identifiable information, right now we're intending to support what we might call two approaches or two methods. And the reason for this is to give flexibility and also acknowledge the fact that we're still very much in a 2.0 type of world. And so, strong arming brands to kind of only interacting in a 3.0 may or may not be the best way to actually build significant traction here. So those two approaches, one we might call a sort of self-contained version. And this would be more of that kind of Web 3.0 version where the brand's coming in, they're defining their target audience in the Trubit platform, and then they're dispersing their NFT to that target audience. And as Stephen was alluding to earlier, that NFT could embed any manner of different benefits, whether it's pass to get early access to a new line of merchandise or a new service, digital collectibles, the list goes on. But yeah, so that would be one method, right? The other method, what we might call the just generic sort of traditional custom audience route, would entail something like being able to get access to like hashed emails. And what's nice is that, platforms like Facebook and Google support hashed emails as custom audiences. And so that could be plugged kind of directly from Trubit. Now, of course, in some ways that goes against the sort of ethos and mission. And so we don't want to in any way kind of rely on that. But that's something that some of our early brand partners would help us kind of identify, like how much would we need to support that early on versus not. But Mitchell, it comes back to what you said, right? Like if I'm a user and I'm willing to share that type of information, then we should also probably support your wish as a user if it means you can earn more. And then others would say, you know what, no, I don't want to share any PII of any kind. And that is your prerogative as a user.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, one thing I'm thinking here is in the crypto industry, like some of the ideas are very kind of like fundamental and core, and it's almost like a matter of time before they actually materialize more. Like even if you think about NFTs themselves, right? Like the idea of a non-fungible token like goes back all the way to like Namecoin in like 2011 or so, right? And then even like NFTs as art go back to like Counterparty in like 2015 or something like that. But it's only kind of like this year when the idea is becoming like more mainstream, and we are seeing more an increased kind of like awareness and interest from consumers into it. Right? So, but there were like several years in the middle where the ideas were there, the technology was kind of there, not really polished to that extent, but it was kind of there. And I feel like this idea of like a data market almost is similar, right? Like I think it has been around. Like it makes a lot of logical sense. So why wouldn't you cut out the middleman and give kind of like direct monetary incentives and benefits to these people directly? But I think one of the key elements is going to be like what has changed now compared to, let's say, 3 years ago or something, where you think that now this idea can actually start to take off, right? Or can gain like real consumer interest here. I have my own thoughts on it, but I want to pause there and first hear yours, and then maybe I can comment on this as well.
If you don't mind, I can jump in on this. So I think there's several forces at play. One is data privacy regulation, such things as GDPR and CCPA, and many countries are creating some version of GDPR, or a watered down version, I would say. And that's driving kind of a force for cookieless solutions for marketing purposes. So that's one thing. And then off the back of that, what we're finding is that Google, Facebook, and the likes of Amazon, so the big ad tech players that account for the majority of digital ad spend, are indeed increasing their walled gardens even higher. Their walls are getting higher. They're using data privacy regulation as an excuse, essentially, to tie and lock in brands. So brands are looking for alternative solutions. cookies are going to be deprecated. And I think that the best answer is something that's decentralized, something that puts ownership back into the consumer's hands. And I come from an ad tech, martech background, and what I'm seeing in this space is currently brands focusing on selling their data to other brands in a somewhat privacy safe manner, but nobody's looking at putting this back into the consumer's hands. So that's one thing. And also I've noticed a lot of brands are trying to jump on the NFT bandwagon, but they're doing so in a perhaps maybe superficial sense, just to kind of jump on the kind of bandwagon from a PR standpoint. But there's something much deeper that can be enabled through NFTs, right? A better value exchange as opposed to just simply, hey, we've created an NFT and we're gifting this to a bunch of consumers. We can create maybe a loyalty program. We can shift from what I like to think, brands shifting from acquisition and retention to building communities, which covers both scenarios. And the community becomes the marketing machine for that brand because the community has skin in the game.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I think a piece from the consumer side as well is that, we could maybe see this as like, maybe kind of akin to what Fold has done for Bitcoin is like, how can I earn, stack sats or just earn passive income for something that I already have or should own? Fold swiping a card, earn Bitcoin. This is kind of similar. It's like, hey, I already have this data. I just need to claim ownership. And kind of to Sajid's point earlier as well, is like, people are getting very, upset. There's increased scrutiny around big tech and, these platforms that are, pretty much abusing your data. Sure, you might agree to the terms and service, but, people are upset and they are looking for ways to, obviously in today's environment, generate more income, get something from something they already have. So I think you're going to see, a lot of push on the consumer side for something like that. Maybe not something to the extent of like, Wall Street bets, but and what they did with GameStop. But I think you're going to see people wanting to be part of a movement. Maybe this is even becomes a DAO or something, but it's, people want to feel as if they're, creating an impact. They can see the change and they can actually benefit from it by being a part of the movement. And I think another reason to your point earlier, Neeb, is that, you said that these have been around for a little bit, but, we've taken a lot of time to study what other platforms have tried to do this in the past. And, they always come with the, coin that someone's never heard of. And so they kind of have to split their time between pushing, marketing some coin that, nobody wants and is worth very little. But people realize like, hey, Bitcoin's not going away. It's, it's staying here and people are looking for any way to, accumulate it. And I think that is, where we kind of find a very, very unique blend in what Trubit is, providing is that people can, again, stack sats for something in a very unique way for, other attempts have just failed because, again, nobody knows what the coin is and it's difficult to get onboarded.
Yeah, I think the earning Bitcoin angle is definitely very unique. And then I would say, like, kind of like to answer my own question from before, that even like 2-3 years ago, the total number of people who have onboarded to crypto, even to just have a wallet and have a concept of like, like buying Bitcoin or earning Bitcoin, like it was fairly little. And this bull market is, I think, the first one where the numbers are going into tens of millions, right? Not single digit millions, right? Depending on how you count. And I think, especially with the recent NFT stuff, like I do think both NFTs and games have been bridges into mainstream for crypto, right? Because they are in some ways easier for the average internet user to understand. They're more playful. They're not as like geeky, quirky tech, right? It's more fun. And I do think like there's a side effect of that once someone has onboarded on crypto, once someone already has a wallet and has experience earning Bitcoin or and so on, like then they are a target market user, right? And I think once your target market becomes big enough that you reach some sort of a escape velocity, right? Like, and I think that is, in my view, is probably like the biggest change that has happened.
Yeah, just maybe one. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to pile just a very anecdotal point on that exact point, Manib. It's like, it's very hard to quantify, like, what is that threshold beyond which this suddenly bubbles to the surface and becomes a very, very real thing for brands. But I mean, earlier today, just as an example, I was speaking with a VP of marketing at a very large US-based retailer. And, I was just kind of talking through some of these different topics, and his perspective was like, this is real now. They've started to even see similar themes come out in different, customer surveys that they do. And so again, very anecdotal and hard to kind of quantify, like, is it tens of millions? Is it, where is that line? But it's pretty clear that brands, I think people would be pretty surprised how, to Sajid's point earlier, it's not that they necessarily know what to do yet. But I think people would be pretty surprised how much on brands' radar this already is. It's sort of a reckoning that, like, okay, we need to develop our strategy. We need to do something. So just an interesting kind of anecdote from earlier today.
Yeah, and I think another quick piece off of that is we've heard from brands that they're constantly trying to add value for their best customers, and a big place that comes in is their loyalty programs. And so if they're the ones that are going to be implementing this, and if Trubit can be that vehicle, then offering NFTs or passes, things like that we've talked about, that'll help us potentially be maybe even a solution in the back end, something of that nature where users are ultimately using the Trubit platform and they're acquiring people that way. So I think brands can also be a large piece there to help increase adoption. As he said, they're looking at this strongly now.
Yeah, and I really like the angle of just simply using Bitcoin. Bitcoin has the biggest brand name, the largest community, and people want to earn it. Like, people have this image of Bitcoin now that it's something valuable and they want to earn it. So not having the complexity of introducing some sort of a new token or coin in there that they might not find that valuable, just going with a straight up idea. Like, I think Lolly is doing a great job, right? Like, they're sending something like $5-6 million in Bitcoin as cash rewards to people. And that's like an easy decision for somebody to make, that, hey, I'll just earn Bitcoin this way.
Right.
Excellent. Should we take some questions from the audience? We'll get started with Astro. Go ahead.
Hi guys, my name is Ragu. How are you?
Great.
I'm a musician. I am into NFTs. I haven't made any NFTs for my music just yet. But I am curious as to what a smart contract provides for licensing as an artist. I don't know if you guys know much about that.
I think just for the sake of, unless anyone wants to ask this, but for the sake of keeping the conversation in alignment, I'm happy to chat with you offline, but maybe get to Astro's question. Nope.
Yeah, the quick answer is whatever you can imagine as far as like the right way that you want to handle, whether it be royalties or any other smart contract type things, you can do it. It's sort of the only limit is your creativity.
If I can just even add one point, I think Astro may have dropped off, so maybe we'll see if they come back. But just because you said it, musician, not to take it in a completely different direction, but like one of the sort of use cases we see here in this whole discussion that we've had thus far, at least for individuals, is the ability for anyone, to generate passive income from their NFT. You would not ever want to hear any music that I create or see any art that I ever produce. And so, not everyone has those talents, but we see this kind of use case as enabling kind of passive income generation from anyone, because we all have data in our digital footprint.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Carlos, do you have a question? Annalise, are you there? Do you have a question?
See Carlos twice.
Hi there, Nintendi. Welcome to the stage. Do you have a question?
Hi, yeah, thanks for taking the question. I was just wondering, is there a mechanism already pre-built or pre-baked in Stacks that's like the engine blockchain for NFTs, the gaming blockchain, that they have a smelting feature, so that there's an inherent or intrinsic baseline value to an NFT that will exist, and you have the option to destroy the NFT and to return the underlying asset.
I couldn't make that entire question out, but I think it was like a kind of a standard basis for NFT's value. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, as in, I think, and the feature in engine is that it lets you like bake in like the engine token into the wrapping it. You can imagine wrapping the token itself into the NFT, and then there's an option to like melt away the NFT, and then you get what was the baseline value back.
Not exactly sure for Stacks specifically on that use case. I don't know if somebody else can speak to that.
Yeah, Mitchell or Manid, does that question resonate? I don't know that we have.
It doesn't exist. I was just wondering if it was already that perspective.
I honestly don't know if I'm completely following the question. What I can say is that there are some. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say there are some, games and other folks that are building, I think what you're talking about, where, you have these like various different world types and owned items, and they have an intrinsic value. There's also the notion of boom boxes on the network. Boom.money, I believe, is their website. They do an interesting sort of model where you could stack an NFT, and so then the NFT is essentially the keys to the Bitcoin yield. And so those obviously have a value denominated in Bitcoin. So check those two things out. Moonray Games is one that I know are working on all kinds of interesting versions of, I think, what you're asking.
Actually, I have some boom boxes, but no, it's not quite exactly what I was asking, but it's okay. I'll probably not explain myself. It's just basically that, let's say you buy something in an NFT, and then if the NFT value then goes to like zero, you have the ability to just get what you've baked in as the inherent token value back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can comment on that. So I think the way to think about NFTs is also like a new type of programming primitive, right? So you have something that is basically unique, right? Like that's where the non-fungible aspect is coming from. Think of that as like some sort of a unique asset, and it's programmable. So you can attach other types of assets to it, which is what kind of like one example is Boomboxes. They were doing it in a very specific way. They were trying to get you stacking for it, but that's a more generic programming ability. You can attach different types of assets there. And maybe what you're trying to ask is that if you attach an asset to an NFT and for some reason the value of the NFT drops, can you then detach that asset and take that asset back? Like that's kind of like what I'm hearing. And the answer is yes, right? Like you can program these things and you can plug and play with these primitives and however you want to.
Cool. Yeah, no, I presume that you could do it if it was coded. I just wanted to know if it already existed as like a template, because I know the engine platform, like when you bake up or cook up an engine NFT, it's actually very straightforward. Just the UI for it at the moment. I actually don't know what's under the hood. But yeah, thanks. Yeah, I was just wondering about that. Thank you.
Yeah, so the answer would be that not the exact thing that you're talking about, but it's not very technically hard to do. So I think in terms of, let's say, extending the current NFT standard to have this functionality, it's like pretty straightforward. And if there's enough interest, I think the community can work on that.
Yeah, there's also a pretty interesting semi-fungible standard that Marvin here at the Stacks Foundation has been working on. I think it's on GitHub somewhere. We can find the link, but just making the like Mandeep said, like NFTs is a primitive. So the more flexible they are to work with, the more things you can do. So keep an eye on that one too.
Yeah, we were looking at that one recently, making these as composable as possible. I like it.
I have a question for Trubit. So I feel like, how long have you been building and what's next? What's part of the roadmap down the line? I know that you guys are creating and launching an NFT project alongside of your services. Can you speak to some of that?
Yeah, we actually birthed this idea, whole platform out of our previous startup that unfortunately couldn't survive COVID. But we've been working on this ever since the Bitcoin conference. We kind of stuck our necks out, said, "Hey, we're going to do it." Went down there, exhibited, gotten pretty close to the Bitcoin team there in the booth. Went really, really well. We got a ton of feedback, and just wanted to make sure, like, hey, if we can't speak to this audience, can't speak to anybody, this won't work. But got a ton of great feedback. Really learned, what brands would want from this, what consumers want from this, and just realizing, like, hey, a lot of people on the consumer side hadn't even thought of this, so it's really good. So we've got hundreds and hundreds of early access signups, maybe over north of 1,000 now, and we're now again building, but looking more towards the NFT collection drop to help us fund some of this. Also, obviously, talking with some of the Stacks grants team on some of the stuff we're proposing and trying to build. We've been kind of just building ever since. But I'm looking for like a Q2, probably maybe closed beta launch or something, if we meet all the timelines. But that's kind of where we're at now. So if people want to get in on the NFT drop and help support, Trubit and what we're doing, that'll be on Stacks NFT the 27th and 28th. That's when that'll be dropping. And we're actually, very happy to be kind of the newest members of Savita Guild. So we'll be working close with, Stereo and that group there as we continue to build this out and make sure that this data is completely user controlled and owned. It's, secure as possible, as we keep building and moving forward.
And just topping that up, we've shamelessly taken a page out of the Cycle team and Explorer Guild's playbook, as Stephen just mentioned and Frankie, you alluded to. So this will just help us really accelerate the development of the platform, but it will also extend some pretty huge benefits to some of our early supporters. So in the spirit of extending the use cases of NFTs, so this collection drop that's going out later this month, 27th and 28th, as Stephen mentioned, there's actually two kind of sub collections there, but they carry with them a earnings multiplier. So if you have it, in your wallet, once we have the Trubit platform up and running, you'll get an earnings multiplier on what you earn in Trubit, which is great. And we've got kind of a whole slew of other benefits. So definitely check that out if you're so curious or inclined. I think we've got a lot of the detail pinned in our on our pinned tweet.
All right, awesome. I feel like my mind is going to two thoughts here. Maybe I'll share with them in case they're helpful. So the first thing is I think going back to how we were talking about both like games and also these NFTs, like they became these bridges to mainstream, partly because like they make things fun for users. So I think like having some sort of especially initially, right? Like initially, like simplifying the user experience and actually making it more fun or enjoyable for people. Like even though like they are actually earning money on their data, right? But it could seem like a task that they kind of like don't want to do or something like that, right? So making it simple and fun might go a long way. And I think the second thing would be like as much as you can automate the Bitcoin rewards so that they're literally like a seamless experience that the aha, like where's the aha moment, right? And I think the aha moment is going to be the first time someone actually receives Bitcoin, and the more kind of like big deal you can make out of that, and the more you can make that experience like very memorable and enjoyable for the user. Like I think that those things initially might make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and you're completely correct. And we've thought about this, to a deep degree. So on the consumer side, we've actually thought of a very mobile first approach. Still building kind of the MVP out, but we want, again, the consumer and our users to actually be part of the creative process. So we've thought of like, hey, you can create your own, kind of Guy Fawkes, V for Vendetta avatar, very similar to kind of these, AR, VR filters you can apply on like Instagram and, Snapchat, things of that nature. But again, you'll be creating your own avatar that is, again, representing your NFT. And we thought of, again, a way of gamifying it would be really cool is if you could kind of unlock certain, maybe filters or like, hats or certain customizations you could put on your face mask or whatever comes by actually going and doing certain actions with your data. So we have several different paths that we can go to get this data. OAuth you're very familiar with, but it's like you could unlock certain capabilities to add to your avatar if you connect via OAuth on Facebook or Google or whatever. You can actually go in and download this data. There's a bigger carrot and bigger reward, bigger types of capabilities you can add to your avatar. If you go and actually download this data archive and upload it, this will enable you to do different things to your avatar. And again, the implied return that you would get in Bitcoin. And to your point, Minnie, as well, with scale, I think this really only comes with scale, which we're aware of, but we also thought of something just super simple. It's just like stick your data. I just want to tap a button and say like, I'm cool with, selling these categories, and then brands can go in and essentially see these kind of pools of data and these data categories, elements, however we want to split them up. But they can go and basically fund these data pools to have access to a kind of like a subscription, if you will. So that way for the actual consumer, it's just super easy. I'm just getting passive income because brands are basically, plugging in and consuming to this data set together, as we aggregate these users. So I completely agree. And we want to make sure that this is super attractive, super appealing, and it doesn't feel like you're managing something. It feels like you're creating something and kind of, lack of better terms, of like sticking it to the man. So that's what we hope we can get across in a very positive way, but also kind of kind of stick the finger to.
Yeah, that's awesome. And from a technical perspective, I don't know if you guys have already looked into the Gaia storage system. We actually did a bunch of work on it before focusing on smart contracts for Bitcoin, which went live with Stacks. And it's effectively, think of that as like a private encrypted cloud storage, but it's in users' controls. And I think it seems like a perfect fit here because this is not the type of data that you want to put on a permanent archival storage like Arweave. Like it's your personal data, right? Like you, even if you encrypt it, you don't want to put it on a public archive, right? Like you want it somewhere in your control, in a decentralized setting. And I think the Gaia storage system might be a pretty good fit here if you haven't already looked into it.
We have. We looked at IPFS and that. Would you be willing to maybe increase the upload size from 20 megs?
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like I think with Gaia, people need to understand that someone has to pay for storage. So there is kind of like a default thing that I think our company just puts the bill for. But
we might break that.
You might break that. But I think a very interesting thing here could be to look at the financial incentives for the money that the users are earning. Maybe you can actually get some sort of agreement done with brands, right? Like I'm just brainstorming here that if you tell the brands that if these types of people are uploading their data, can they actually foot the bill for X number of users, right? Like initially, because I don't think storage is that expensive. It's just that like they would be willing to pay a lot more for the data. The storage is like peanuts compared to that. But your company shouldn't pay for it, right? If this scales up to like millions or tens of millions, then that's something that your company would probably start seeing a big bill. But if you can pass that on to the people who are interested in the data, or maybe the users themselves, like if every user is willing to deduct like $5 or $10 monthly from their earnings, that's super easy. Then 10 million users would just do that, right?
Yeah, and not to get too far out there, but we've thought about this a little bit back in the early days as well. But there's unutilized storage space on all of our Bitcoin nodes, and we thought of like, hey, is there a way to build a bridge and actually enable any of us running a Raspberry Pi or something at home to store some of this data too? And again, like brands could put the bill, in a sense, and kind of subsidize that. But we're definitely looking for ways to do that, as we know that there will be probably a lot of cost as we move all this data out of Web 2 into Web 3 if this does really scale.
Yeah, if you're targeting hardcore Bitcoin people initially, you could also talk to Umbrel, if I'm pronouncing the name right. I think they could be a really good partner because they're literally, I think the last time I synced with them, they're looking at building an app store. So your thing could actually be an app in their dashboard. And these people already have a node running, right? So then storing additional data is actually not that big of a deal for them.
Yeah, love what they're doing. And the App Store's got a bunch of great stuff in there already. But we're definitely looking at that, and I assume we would probably need it soon enough.
So I actually have another question. if I were to pull my information from Instagram and Facebook, I'm still using Instagram and Facebook. So do they not still have my data to sell? Or how does that whole process work?
Yeah, I can speak to this a bit, and then Ian, Sajid, I'm sure you have something on this too. Yeah, there's unfortunately just nothing you'll ever be able to do, in the Web2 world. Like, you've agreed to these terms, like, it's kind of a twofold answer. You can, of course, delete your Facebook or delete something, and we're hoping better solutions come out in the future, or, these platforms will adapt and offer something like this. But yeah, I mean, the thing is like, none of this data is still shared across platforms. So like, we're really hoping what breaks this with Bitcoin is the, kind of carrot is that, Google's never going to share Facebook. Google is never going to share data with Facebook. Facebook's never going to share data with Twitter, so on and so forth. And if you're anchoring all this data, this cross-platform data, to you, then that becomes very powerful. And again, we're hoping that, we can have some influence here down the line. But yeah, there's nothing that you're going to ever be able to do from, Instagram being able to access the data that you already have. You can go in and like obviously delete your account or something like that. But, that's just the nature of the game there. Once you create an account, they're doing it. So maybe there's one day a standard where we're the API, or, you can log in and connect your, Trubit NFT or, something else that is the one that's actually feeding the data so the app or, service can consume it. But yeah, unfortunately, that's just, the hard truth today that these platforms do that. And there's nothing you can do to break away from that unless you jump out of the platform.
Yeah, I think of that as almost like you're forking a copy of your data, so the company still has a copy, and you're not seeing any benefit from the copy that the company has. But with this copy, you can actually directly start monetizing it. But then if you're more kind of like you want to go one step further, then after forking, you can try to delete the company copy by closing your account, right? But I don't think a lot of people would do that. Not until there are really good alternative services in the Web 3.0 world.
Maybe we can work with Jack a bit.
Yeah, that was interesting. Thank you, Anib.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like the success metric, right? Like, today that percentage, you think of your data as an asset that's throwing off, X dollar equivalent, per year. And like right now you're capturing 0% of that. And so how can we at least move that needle up to 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, right? Over time is at least the initial mission. And then, Maria, as you said, there's ways to sort of nuke your account, but at the end of the day, there's only so much we can do.
Awesome. So it looks like we have a few more questions. We'll start with Param, then move to Andre, and then J Crypto.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Yeah. So I this is so cool. You guys are talking about like interoperability and kind of like these different building blocks that are being built on stacks. And when he was talking about some API documentation, and I'm just wondering, I saw today a project that it's like an AR NFT of a floating version of Miami Coin, and obviously it's not Miami Coin, but it's an NFT of a drawing of a Miami Coin, and I'm just wondering, like, in terms of, I tried to mint the project today, and it was a little bit slow to mint on stacksnft.com. But I'm wondering if like the amount of building blocks causes the mint to be slower. I guess that's a yes or no question. But if maybe Munib probably can answer this. But a follow-up question to that is, I've heard in the past that if the contract is written poorly, if the smart contract is written poorly, the NFT mint slower, or it causes the mempool to process slower. Is that true? Like, yeah.
So I think this is a general speed and scalability thing, where I think that the thing to realize about Stacks is that Stacks focuses on decentralization and security at the Stacks main chain there, right? Like think of this as like a Stacks node can be run on a Raspberry Pi anywhere globally, like in any city or anywhere like that. You can't even do that with Ethereum 1.0, and 2.0 is going to become even worse than that, right? So where is the trade-off? The trade-off is the network capacity of the main chain, right? So we think of scalability as like scaling in layers. So the Stacks mainnet went live this year, and I think the biggest things that are going to follow are going to be things like subnets and app chains. And you should think of them as like scalability layers around the Stacks main chain. And in terms of minting, so a subnet basically trades off like decentralization for much faster speeds. Like think like Solana like speeds, but you always have the Stacks main chain that is fully decentralized and secure that way, right? So a practical solution would be that a mint is actually happening on a subnet, so it's really fast. And then for long-term storage of your NFTs, you would just withdraw them to the Stacks main chain. And same with like other applications that require like really high speed, you would typically run them on a subnet. You typically wouldn't run it on the Stacks main chain.
Got it. Yeah, that's okay. So that's super fascinating. I've read a little bit about app chains too, and so you know the trilemma. I think you brought this up with me before, but the trilemma blockchain problem of like, you know, there's trade-offs of each blockchain, you know, and sometimes the fast ones are less decentralized or less secure or whatnot. And does that mean that like when people use either NFTs built on app chains or other projects built on app chains, like it's less secure or something, or yeah, like what's the kind of equation there?
So I think there's a difference between app chains and subnets. With app chains are more suited for projects that have a token, and they're more self-contained. Like there isn't a lot of interactions with other types of assets. And so imagine like, you know, some sort of a social network or something where you're contained within a social network, and but then it requires a separate token as well because there's mining involved. Right. So app chains are more app specific. That's why they're named app chains. Subnets are more generic, right? Subnets are pretty much like you can run any application there. They're just faster, but yes, you're trading off decentralization, right? So they're a little bit more centralized than the main chain.
Got it. All right. Thank you so much, Mandeep.
Thanks for your question, Pram. Oh, Andre?
I think you might be meaning Andrew. I'll assume that's me. Thanks for inviting me. I am curious about how, like, if every of these new all of these new applications of NFTs, are they like, is every new application or game going to does that require its own NFT, or am I going to be living in a world where I can have like a Bitcoin monkey that I bought on the Stacks NFT and then go to some application that was developed in Solana or some metaverse and bring my Bitcoin monkey over to the Solana metaverse? Because right now I'm just trying to work that out because I got a bunch of different wallets and I'm buying or minting on different chains and none of these are really talking to each other. So I'm wondering where that's going and if you have any, I'm sure you have thoughts on that. So that's what I'm chewing on right now.
I think let me comment on that a little bit. So I think 6-7 months ago, the mainstream narrative was that, you know, there's going to be mostly Ethereum, right? Even though for years, like we've been in the camp that, you know, it's likely going to be a multi-chain world with a pretty large set of activities actually happening around Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin, we believe that Bitcoin is going to be the center of the Web3 world. So I think the first thing is already coming true. Right now, everyone's realizing that no, it's not going to be Ethereum. It's actually going to be a bunch of different L1s, right? You have Solana, Avalanche, Algorand, you know, Stacks is coming up. Like all of that is happening. So people are kind of like realizing that. But the bet that we're making, and which is not fully out there in the market yet, is that there's going to be a ton of activity around Bitcoin, right? And once this world starts getting better interconnected, and people are working on that, there are bridges, there are other types of protocols coming up that are more high level and multi-chain by design, right? So you should expect in general much better connectivity between these chains in the future, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, right? So in the short term, it's a little bit like, you know, there is going to be more there isn't going to be consolidation in the short term, right? So there's going to be an expanding market, and then some sort of consolidation, and maybe more winners would emerge in the consolidation phase, right? Some of the projects might not get that much traction and would frizzle out. But in the short term, I think there will be more L1s, more activity on all of them, and we're in a rapidly expanding market. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I guess, and then more simply, like, how would, in the future, I guess, if someone's building it, would I hang my Miami Coin family NFT in my Solana room on the Solana metaverse?
Yeah, I think that would depend on how friendly and these chains are, and if they're direct kind of like bridges or other cross-chain applications there. But let's say, for example, we're pretty friendly with the Algorand people. Like, they're also working on Clarity. Let's say that there's a bridge between Algorand and Stacks, and the way the NFT is designed. So now you're getting into like really standards and how to interoperate. So let's say, because they're also using Clarity, they start using a similar standard for NFTs as well. Then it's much easier for these assets to actually move around, right? Like, you could send it over, and the apps running on the Algorand side could actually understand your NFT, which I think it makes the entire ecosystem more valuable, right? Because you're kind of like connecting. If you think of these sovereign blockchains as like countries, it's a little bit like you're opening up trade between each other, right? And you're kind of like saying, okay, we will adhere to a certain set of rules to be able to have trade between each other and open up more roads or something like that, right? And I think that's going to be a generally healthy thing. It's unclear right now, like, how it's going to play out, like which chain is going to connect with who and how that picture is going to evolve. Like, I think it's very, very early days. Most people are internally focused right now. They're all building their own internal infrastructure.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Maneet.
Thanks for your question, Andrew. What about avatarians? Avatarians. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, thanks a lot for giving me a chance to ask a question. I was interested in the blockchain, and I recently had some of them are more sustainable than other. So I'm not sure if that would shape the conversation moving forward. Given that there are so many now out there, would you think that sustainability would be a key factor in determining which one will dominate?
I can take this one as well. So I think this is a little bit like, I know there's a lot of noise in the media about the sustainability of blockchain, but it's mostly proof of work. That's the criticism, because proof of stake actually doesn't have that much of an energy footprint at all. And most of the new systems are actually proof of stake, right? Which is not necessarily a good thing, right? Because it means that you're seeing a single design point that might have potential flaws in it being overexplored, and you're seeing a lot of systems basically just adopting a similar set of consensus algorithms, right? I would actually like to see more different types of consensus algorithms and different types of blockchains come up, because that would increase the decentralization of the entire space. But putting that thought aside, I think most of the energy criticism is usually just directed at proof of work, and even within proof of work, Bitcoin is kind of like the biggest one that gets that. And over there, I think some of the concerns are overblown, right? Like, if you start looking at the numbers, like how these miners are incentivized to use clean energy, how they're actually producing energy in places where you wouldn't have economic activity otherwise. So it's like a net benefit for those regions where this happens. And then the arguments around, and that's the biggest argument, that to define like sound money, which is really what Bitcoin is, you actually require some sort of proof of work that is outside of the system. The biggest criticism of proof of stake is that it's basically referencing things internal to the system. Right? There's no value value of work that is being done outside of the system itself. So it's like you're trying to build something that is self-referential, and it might collapse on itself, right? And so I think it becomes a little bit complicated, the discussion around energy efficiency, but the high level picture is proof of work is not as bad as media might, make you believe. It's actually necessary for defining something that is truly kind of like, durable, sound money like Bitcoin. And then most of the new systems, they're not following it anyway, right? Like they're quote unquote energy efficient by default. So it's a non-issue there.
Yeah, and I would add to that, your question is great in that you've kind of identified sustainability as an issue. And I've been working with more and more artists over the past few months as they sort of look to get into NFTs. And it's typically one of the first questions they ask, right? So it's like, is Stack sustainable? Like I hear Bitcoin is killing the planet. Can I build on your platform and still feel good about myself at the end of the day? And so it's certainly an issue. I think it's definitely like a vector on which people are making decisions about what they choose. The really nice thing about Stacks is that we recycle proof of work that's already spent. And so effectively you're reusing electricity, you're not burning more. And a lot of the artists that I've been working with are really excited about that. Even going back to some of the earlier NFT launches on Stacks, like Residio, where Cara Delevingne's actual collection was benefiting the planet. And so it's certainly an issue, but I think on Stacks we have a really strong narrative there, and we're seeing artists embrace that. So it's exciting.
Yeah, cool. And the question about interoperability as well is a good question. Whereas, for example, those blockchains that are going to be more sustainable than others, or prove to be more dominant in the market, are going maybe to collaborate with each other further down the line. So that was a really eye opener for me. Yeah, and really thanks for your answers, guys.
Thanks for your question. So it looks like we're coming up on time. Trubit, do you have any last words, any announcements you would like to share with us? Is there anything else?
No, I mean, we really appreciate everybody's time. We look forward to continue building, within the community and working with, against Ibiza Guild and Stacks NFT and everybody else. We're excited to be members and working with all of them, and hope to, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out, or if they want to get involved, join the Discord, just DM me or Ian or Saj anytime. We're up 24/7 pretty much. So hit us up, and we're excited to deliver Trubit here soon enough.
Speak for yourself, Stephen. But no, if there's anyone who kind of blindly stumbled into this, and this is like your first exposure to, Stacks, I would encourage you to just take the plunge. I mean, it's been a totally thrilling experience for us to, get deeper within the community over these last 6 to 8 months, and there's just a ton of exciting stuff as hopefully this conversation embodied. So once again, Frankie and Munib, Mitchell, others, thanks for having us on, and really enjoyed the discussion. You can check out our Twitter page. We've got our website. We've got our Discord there. We're going to be communicating a lot in the Discord server for the upcoming NFT launch later this month. There are still whitelist passes too. So if that is so interesting, head on over there. But again, it's been an awesome journey thus far. We're excited for what we have ahead.
Awesome. I'm really excited about what you're building.
Appreciate that, man. It's great.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Munib, Mitchell, any last words?
No, just let us know how we can help.
Excellent. Thanks all. Join us next week for Crypto Internet, same day, every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Have a great day, you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.